Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections, and welcome to the February 2021 in-service training. As always, we have our in-service training that kind of highlights everything that we did in the month of February. So that's why this is our February 2021 in-service training. A few of the things we want to talk about, let's jump into Notion and see what we got going on. So first things first, let's scroll down to our 2021 in-service training. We're going to click over on our February 2021 in-service training. And what we should have now is the safety topics. So we have a lot of safety updates that we did. A while ago, you may have remembered in one of our in-service trainings that we had discussed with our safety that I had gone through an entire analysis of everything that we have as far as Two Moose Home Inspections, being a home inspector, what some of our safety risks are. And one of the things that I left out was actually the safety of the people that we're doing an inspection with. What if there is a medical emergency with the people that are there with us, our clients, maybe another contractor that is there, an agent, whatever it may be. And I said, you know what, we as home inspectors have an obligation to make sure those people are safe and well taken care of. So what I did for this in-service training is that our main topic was basically just safety. So if we come over to our procedure manual, there's a new section just for safety. There's procedures for each one of our services that we offer, but we're going to jump into safety. And what we have is there is tourniquet, there's CPR, there's choking. And let's just take a look at this real quick. And sorry, I didn't have the screen up, but basically we go from here to procedure manual, then we come over to safety. And then once we're over at safety, we then can jump into this. So as far as tourniquet is concerned, I think we already had a conversation that if an inspector falls through while doing an attic inspection, falls through the ceiling and lands on the floor below, that could be bad news bears. And so we want to make sure that they can apply a tourniquet to themselves in the case of an emergency. So that way they'll contact 911, start placing the tourniquet. And if they happen to pass out, that might have been the one action that could have saved their lives. And actually, this Journal of American College of Surgeons has confirmed that it is 6 times less mortality whenever a tourniquet is applied, even by a civilian. And so that right there, the ability that we can increase our life expectancy if something were to happen, 6 times better chance that we can have a good outcome. That's exactly what we're looking for. And so basically, we just have a bunch of videos about how to apply tourniquets, when to apply tourniquets, a lot of safety issues with tourniquets, and that you don't want to keep them on for more than 2 hours, so on and so forth. And so each one of our guys has the ability where on the back of their belt, we actually have a tourniquet, just like this one right here. And so then this tourniquet is inside of a pouch. You basically flip this up, and now you are brought over to the actual tourniquet. You can pull that out. Here's a tourniquet that is currently out, and you really want to be careful because there are a lot of knockoffs. And whenever it comes to a tourniquet, you might say, hey, I want to save a couple bucks or whatever, and I'm not going to spend $30 per tourniquet. I'm going to spend, $10 per tourniquet. Make sure that you find the right thing. But basically, if we have an issue, then right here, we have our tourniquets. They can pull out the tourniquet just like this, place it onto their arm. You would grab this red tab that is right here. You would just cinch it down just like that. Once it's cinched down, you might want to do the high and tight approach. You might just want to do a couple inches above where you have the issue. You're going to take this right here, the windlass, and you are going to just start tightening that up until it cuts off the blood flow, until you don't have a distal pulse or whatever it may be. Take the rest of this on your arm, put it in between these two things. You might have to go around twice. In this case, twice will work. And then we're going to pull this over. And in my pocket, and my other inspectors, we always have ourselves a Sharpie. So now I can write the time on here if I'm conscious enough to do so. But that's why the first thing we do is we contact 911. So basically with a tourniquet, that was just in general terms, how to apply a tourniquet to your arm. I need to take this off. And that was only one twist. So that is how you would apply a tourniquet to your arm if you were self-rescuing. If, let's say, as you fell through the attic, you were, cutting your arm. So anyway, that is one part of the safety, which would be tourniquet. The next part is that we have our CPR. And so CPR, if we're there and one of our buyers, happens to have a heart attack or something along those lines, we really want to know how to do CPR. If the buyer has a heart attack, a contractor has a heart attack, a realtor has a heart attack, our inspectors need to know how to take care of these types of situations. So hands-only CPR, and basically the American Red Cross is just phenomenal with the resources they have. Obviously, this is their bread and butter, so of course they would. Moving over in the safety side of things, there's also choking. And so choking is one of those things Just the other day, I had a guy eating a sandwich in the middle of the home inspection. And so if he were to have choked on that sandwich, me as a home inspector, I want to make sure that I can change my role, become that first responder and save a life. And so what we have here is we have conscious infant choking, unconscious infant choking, and then we move down into basically child and also adult. And so this is both for conscious and unconscious choking. And it tells you when you should be contacting 911, when you should be trying to help the individual get that dislodged from their windpipe, from their lungs. And I just think it's very, very important for our inspectors. So the other part of the topic, if we head back here over to our in-service training, the other part of the topic about safety also includes safety for our inspectors. And so one of the things that you see here is, so first aid kits, yes. Tourniquets, yes. Basic life-saving, yes. That's going to be your CPR, stopping somebody from choking and having that type of an issue. And then we also have identifying dangerous people. So there are times where there may be a neighbor who may not have the best intentions for one of our inspectors, or may have an issue with the people that are selling the house. And that could put us into, an issue where we don't know the backstory of why this neighbor might have an issue. We don't know if why the seller would have an issue, why a family member of the seller would have an issue. But the main thing is identifying dangerous people and understanding whenever you're in a position of advantage or disadvantage, and how to safely remove yourself from that house. And let's just come back another day to do the inspection, or come back with a little bit of support. And is it okay to call 911? Yes. If you ever feel unsafe, it's 100% acceptable to dial 911. If anybody is intimidating you, harassing you, whatever it may be, dial 911. It's not even a question. Just do it. And so I want to make sure that our inspectors are aware that if there is somebody who is confrontational, who is not safe to be around, that they can excuse themselves from that inspection at any moment. And we'll just type into the report, limitation, unable to continue inspecting, dangerous person on premises. And we can go back and do what needs done later. So then safely removing yourself from a home inspection. Let me just tell you, what you don't want to do is you don't want to say, hey, buddy, calm down. As soon as you do that, I am calm, and they're just going to lose their mind. And so it's really, really important that we understand the way that we are doing a crisis intervention. And so if this person obviously is in crisis, we don't know what the crisis is. We don't know exactly what's happening and what brought them to this point. But the main thing is we have somebody that is in crisis. So a CIT, or crisis intervention training, is something that allows us to A, identify that somebody is in crisis, and B, work on ways to for us, we aren't trying to resolve that person's crisis. For us, we are trying, without making the issue worse, how to get out of that home and away from danger. And understanding that they are in a crisis, and for them, that crisis is real. And for them, there is nothing more important in that moment than that crisis. And so for our ability to, instead of trying to tell them, hey, buddy, just calm down, that's not going to work. That is not going to work at all. Listen to what they're saying, repeat what it is that they're saying to them, make sure they think that you are understanding fully what they have to say. And as you're doing so, start to move yourself towards a position of safety. And anyway, it's just important for our inspectors to understand that every house, yes, has its issues, but there's also the potential that we might have neighbors, family members, people that are a part of a trust that feel like maybe they didn't get an inheritance the way they should have. A million different reasons that a house could become unsafe. And we just want to make sure that we are always in the safest position that we can, because we want to inspect another day. We don't want this inspection to be our last, whether that be with electricity, ladders, first aid, CPR, safety with choking hazards, applying tourniquets, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that we can be the first responders if there's something that happens to one of our clients. And we want to make sure that we can also self-rescue if something were to happen to us. So really, really big push on safety for this in-service training. And I'm really, really excited about that, because I always want to make sure that the people that work for us are completely safe. So let's jump forward just a little bit. What you'll see here is that we also have a new employee. I just skipped forward in the updates here, but the employee, his name is Jeremy, and he is just starting with us now. So now I have Shay and Jeremy. Both those guys are just really, really good people. And I think if you have a good person that's passionate and interested in the task, then you can teach them all the knowledge that there is. And so that's why safety is so important. I want to make sure that we have a culture of safety, not just for our inspectors, but for the people that are also in the house. And so with Jeremy, his training schedule, oh my goodness, poor guy. He has a minimum of 90 credit hours that he has to complete. In addition to those 90 credit hours, He also has probably another 15 or 20 to be able to do all of our add-on services. And we are on a fast-paced schedule to get him with all of that information into his mind, because what I want is for him to be able to come out, do an inspection, have all that information in the back of his mind so he's ready to rock and roll, that he knows what he's looking for. He knows why we're doing the things that we're doing and the way that we're doing them. And so whenever we're actually in person, then he'll be able to take the information that he has learned and either identify something as, this doesn't quite feel right. What's happening here? Take a picture of it, and he knows where to get the resources and reference. And also, whenever we do that field training together, then that means that it's not that he's seeing this information for the first time. He's seeing it for the second time, the third time, the fourth time. And same with these in-service trainings. These in-service trainings are 100% designed that in the month of February, here are some of the things that really stuck out to us. And because they stuck out to us, we don't want our inspectors to miss it. And that is why with our training, all of my inspectors, so myself, obviously, since I'm doing these in-service trainings, but Shay and also Jeremy have to go through and they watch every single one of these in-service trainings to make sure they're aware of the things that caught us off guard. And some of these issues I provide, some of these issues Shay provides. And whenever Jeremy is fully on the team, whenever he's at a home inspection, he's like, wow, guys, I almost missed this. Or wow, guys, I've never seen this before. Or wow, guys, this happens every single time. And I just want people to be aware of it. Then he gets to add it right here into our software, and then we're good to go. So anyway, super awesome. Now, on the report writing side of things, I guess we can go back to this view here. So on the report writing side of things, I have been working very diligently on our template. Now, before we had like just over 1,000 something things that I had typed into our template. You know, something that might say there's no GFCI outlet within 6 feet of a sink in the kitchen or whatever. We are now pushing just close to 4,000. I've been working to get this right where we need to be. I am almost done. I'm probably a week away. And we're going to be rolling out a brand new template to help us make sure that we are identifying everything. Obviously, the template will continue growing, but to have 4,000 deficiencies, you would think, oh yeah, 4,000 deficiencies. That should be able to cover everything in the house. Honestly, I think that it might cover a third, maybe half of every issue that we can find in a house. The number of things that could be wrong. I mean, you take a building code book that's like this thick. That's just the code book on how you should build things. So each one of those things can be wrong. And then you add into how can each one of those things go wrong in a period of time. And it's astronomical. I think, a decade from now, we might have 8,000 issues that are listed. And the objective of this, what you'll see in our updates, is that we also have new cellular iPads for everyone. So before we were using Wi-Fi iPads because, we didn't quite transition fully into doing the software on scene. But now that we have such a robust, huge template that is ready for us to use, we can do the report on scene and have it with more accuracy, better quality, and just overall just a better thing, and be updating through cellular data. So that way that report is basically ready right whenever we're done. Now, the things we'll still have to do is upload the 360-degree photos afterwards. And so, there'll still be like just a little bit of report writing. But instead of going home and spending 2 hours, 3 hours writing a report, now hopefully the length of the inspection will increase maybe by 45 minutes to an hour, maybe, depending on the inspection. But we will have a report completely done. And whenever my inspector goes home, like Shay, he has a brand new baby son, just beautiful kid. Whenever he goes home, I want him to be done with work. I want him to be able to focus on his family, because the things that really matter are family. Everybody knows family is the most important thing. And so that's why we're having such a push to get us away from doing a 3-hour-long home inspection. And then after doing a 3-hour-long home inspection, coming home and doing another 2 hours of report writing whenever your family needs you to be present and needs you to be there. So that's why we're really going for the push. I think I've talked enough about updates and other things like that. I'm very excited to welcome Jeremy onto the team. So now basically 2 Moose home inspections is 3 inspectors strong, which is a really, really big deal. So let's go ahead and jump into our report writing and some of the things that we found. We're going to try to go through this a little bit quickly because I did kind of talk your ear off. So let's get to it. So receptacle, loose wipe connector. So basically, whenever you put in the plug, there are these wipe connectors that basically hold on to the plug. If it's loose, then it's going to fall right out. And so whenever it falls, what it's actually doing is exposing some of the metal to the touch. So if you were to touch it, if a kid were to touch it, if you were to drop, your spatula, metal spatula or something on there, then you're toast. And that's going to be a really, really bad time. So if there's a loose wipe connector where it just comes in and out really easily and it kind of sags under its own weight, just update it. It should be a $3 fix, but if you're not an electrician, let's just say a $103 fix, and then that'll get you all taken care of. So moving on, storage, poor function. So this is one of those things where we go through and we pull on drawers and we pull on cabinets, and normally we have like loose hinges, loose hardware, loose whatever. But whenever a drawer is loose like this, there's some hardware that's normally broken that needs to be repaired. And I think that it can be repaired, but it's going to cost you money. And that's why we, talk about it. Inside of this, there was some moisture on the ceiling, and what it was moisture stains. But there was no added moisture, nothing in the thermal. The moisture meter didn't detect anything. That's that thing that you can see. It's stabbed into the ceiling. And so it uses 2 prongs, and then it basically figures out the relative moisture between those 2 prongs. And so there is some electrical connectivity between a wet surface. And so then what that does is it kind of just figures out how moist is that particular surface. And in this one was bone dry. And so then my recommendation then, what you can see at the bottom here, is just inquire with the seller. Ask the seller, hey, what happened? Why is this way? And it could just be as easy as, oh, it was a repair that was fixed a while ago. They put on a new roof. It was an upstairs condo, and so they had a leak. They repaired the leak, no issue. Okay, well, I still probably have to re-drywall the area, retexture the area, and repaint the area. So it's still going to cost you some money, and that's why it would be an orange issue as opposed to like a blue issue. So then moving on, it's really easy to put labels on your circuits. And so the benefit to this is, if you trip a circuit, you know exactly what you tripped. If you need to turn something off to do an electrical upgrade, or if an electrician comes by to do it, then boom, there they are. I mean, you're paying for these electricians by the hour. And so if you're paying $150, $200 an hour for a master electrician, and they come in and they say, I see, 20 of these things, and I don't know exactly which circuit to turn off, and they have to go around just guessing which circuit, and that takes time, you could lose 20 minutes, half hour. Let's just say you're losing $100 just because you didn't label these circuits. And you can do that at home. Turn on all your lights, turn on all your devices, and one by one, switch off each one of these circuits. And then you can just write on the name: north bedroom, south bedroom, living room. Makes it super duper easy. All right. This particular shower, definitely end of life. There was so much moisture behind these tiles that they were like peeling off of the wall. So these shower tiles were just done. And right around the door was really the worst. But what it was that it was a steam shower. And because of that, the steam had gone through into the back. And I don't believe that they had proper waterproofing or anything along those lines. And that has then caused a rot or a decay behind. And I guarantee you the mold issue is more than likely robust. And now those tiles are falling off. And because those tiles are falling off, it's just due for a replacement. It is time for something new. This one here is an inexpensive fix. So why is it red? So we're talking a brand new baffle might cost you $8, and $8 isn't a big deal. Let's just say $15 because you get all the bits and pieces to be able to put in a brand new baffle. And a novice, a person who has never done this before, it might take them a half hour. A pro, somebody who does this all the time, 5 minutes, easily 5 minutes. And so what this is the in-sync disposal. And so obviously blades that spin around really fast and they're designed to break up a whole bunch of stuff that's in there. Well, if your hand goes down into that, that's going to be a bad time. And so these baffles prevent splashing, and they also prevent people from putting objects in there that they shouldn't put in there. So ideally, what I'd love to see is that this baffle just be reinstalled. So that way we have a brand new, good to go, super safe sink that doesn't splash anybody, keeps the noise down, and also doesn't let anybody get hurt. So rubber supply lines. What happens with rubber supply lines is that where they crimp that end onto the end of the rubber line, a lot of times it might be over or under crimped, or as you move the pipe, we might get a little bit of fraying to that rubber. And basically rubber supply lines are always under pressure, which means that any leak can become catastrophic. And so anytime that you see rubber supply lines, and right next to it, you can see that one of the lines is rubber and one of them is a braided stainless steel. So why is it that they had put a braided stainless steel there? Well, probably because the rubber failed. So just replace both. It's a $20 investment. It takes you no time at all. If you have an index finger and a thumb, you can just tighten that right on there. It's as simple as putting on a garden hose. And so I would highly recommend that if you look behind your laundry machine and you see that there is not braided stainless steel, just get it replaced. You can probably do it yourself if it's easily enough accessible. So here is, I think on last month's in-service training, we had talked about this as well, but this is a prime example. In order to exit this house in the case of fire or emergency, that key has to be inside of that deadbolt. And there were 2 doors that had this. And if that key is ever removed and there is a fire, there is literally no way to even kick down this door. If you've ever kicked down a door before, you basically have to kick the door down in the direction that it swings. So that is the weakest part of the door. If you have to go in the opposite direction, you are battling so much support that is created by that door and the hinges. You literally would have to break off all the hinges, break off everything around the jamb, and just push that door all the way out. You are not getting out of that door. So in the case of a fire, you need to make sure that on the inside, no matter what, you can always unlock that door. If you cannot unlock that door, you're going to have a bad time. And by bad time, I mean death. So this is a $15 fix. Just get it done. $15. It's in red. What do you mean $15? It's only $15. But this issue right here could kill you. So please make sure that inside of a house, you always have a way to get out and it doesn't require a key to get out. All right. This particular house, very interesting. So they had a wall and they had a roof coming to the wall. Now, normally there's a thing called a cricket. And basically just think of that as like a diverter that will divert the water to either side. And so if that water gets diverted to either side, then we have no issues. Now, this particular house, the thermal imaging just shows that the snow is up against the wall. And so we have some really, really cold spots on the wall, but the moisture meter did not find any elevated levels of moisture or anything. So they probably did a great job because they knew that this would be an issue. They probably did a great job of waterproofing everything, so it wouldn't be an issue. But still, the recommendation is install what's referred to as a cricket. It basically takes that slope and it tells it to go this way and not touch the wall. That's what we want to see is a cricket like that. So here are the photos of this particular house. And you can really see in that center photo how cold that snow is that's just resting right up against that wall. And you can see in the photo to the left of that, that basically that snow is touching the wall. And we just don't want that snow to be touching the wall. We want it to go somewhere else because whenever it melts, it's not just going to be snow, it's going to be water. And if it melts inconsistently, because again, you can see the cold temperature inside the house, that means it's going to melt, and then the cold is going to freeze it, and then it's going to melt, and then the cold is going to freeze it. We're basically making an ice dam up against that wall, and because there's an ice dam up against that wall, now we have the issue that water can come up and underneath the siding and into the house, and we just want to try to avoid that. So installing a cricket, not a big deal. Any carpenter, any roofer, anybody could install you a cricket that basically just takes the water, pushes it to the side instead of letting it hit into the wall. So interior ceiling. So on this house, I was up inside of that attic, crawl space, whatever, and it was basically just batt insulation. If you're unfamiliar of what batt insulation is, it's basically just insulation, normally fiberglass, that looks like a folded blanket. And so it might be, 16 inches wide by 4 feet long. It just looks like a folded blanket, nice and thick and puffy. Don't roll in it because fiberglass is really itchy. But it goes into these voids. It just goes right into that cavity or that space. And here what you can see, which is what I saw whenever I was in the attic, is that they're just kind of like falling out of the voids. They just need to be resecured where they need to be. And so what we can see is the cold air from the attic is taking the heat away from the living space. And we don't want that to happen because that reduces energy efficiency. So what are we talking here? I don't know, a couple bucks, by a couple bucks, maybe like $50 worth of insulation, and then we can make sure that we are not losing energy efficiency with our heating bill because the heat is not escaping. So really, really easy fix, super accessible attic, super maneuverable attic. We just need to make sure that insulation is put right back where it needs to go. All right. So in this attic, interesting thing is that we have a sewage vent pipe, and that sewage vent pipe was coming up and it was no longer connected at the top. And so now all that sewer gas is going into your attic, and that's less than ideal because one, sewer gases could be flammable, super unlikely, but it could be flammable. And number two, it just smells really, really bad. And you can see that they had a mechanical union where basically they just put the two different pipes. So it was a PVC pipe and an ABS pipe, and they just need to tighten it down. So really they just need to loosen up that clamp, put it back in place and tighten it down. Super easy fix. And then if we take a look at these pictures here, we can see that there were some pipes that were in use. So in that upper right-hand corner, we have a pipe that's no longer in use. So since it's no longer in use, that means that whenever it rains, instead of the water going down the pipe and then over to the sewer, it's going down the pipe and then into the attic. So we just want to put a cap on top of that. And then on the bottom left-hand side, you can see that there's an orange circle and there's a green circle. And you see that green circle is saying that we are above that 6 inches. So that way, if there's snow and other things like that, that vent pipe, that vent stack can still work just the way it's supposed to. The other one, a little bit too short. I don't think it's doing what it needs to be doing. And so I was unable because of the snow to get up there to measure it, but I'm pretty sure it's less than 6 inches. And even if it isn't, with the amount of snow that they get in that area, we definitely want it to be higher than it is. And I believe that the one that is super low is the one that needs to be adjusted. So it's real easy. Push it up a little bit higher, put an extra, 12 inches, mechanical union, and we're done. It's fixed. It's that simple. So anyway, just something to be aware of, that if you're in your attic, make sure the pipes have a place that they're going. Every pipe should get to the exterior. So this house here, this was actually the same house with the lack of cricket. And what you can see is that because of that, we got water that was coming down into the garage. And because it was coming down into the garage, you can see that white stuff, which is efflorescence, which is basically the water comes through the wall. And whenever it evaporates and dries, it leaves just a little bit of mineral deposits right there. And so this was not severe. This was not, a big deal. Really, I didn't see any issues with cracking. I didn't see any issues with anything. And if they fix that cricket, then that will also fix that type of an issue. Because we also need to do just, water movement, drainage, whatever. But I think all the water was kind of going there. So during spring runoff, that makes it a little bit more difficult. But no, it's super minor, just something to be aware of, but really not a big deal. All right. So this is a good way to kill people. Let's just talk about it. So the filler plates are not present. So what does that mean? Inside of there, they punched out every single hole, but they didn't fill it with a circuit breaker for every single hole that was there. So we put in these filler plates to basically prevent somebody from putting their hand into the circuit panel and being electrocuted. Now, both of these, if you look where the two arrows are pointing down, those two arrows are pointing to pieces of metal, and one side is 120 volts. The other side is 120 volts. And because of the service panel being a 200 amp, being attached to a 200 amp breaker, that's 200 amps. If you have 0.7 amps going across your heart, that's enough to kill you. So 200 amps, I don't know how many times you can die. I think only once, but this thing will kill you. And the scary thing is that it was right next to a couch and the panel was left open. No lock on it, no nothing. And so if a kid were on the couch and they put their hand in there, it would be game over. And so we just really want to make sure, how much are you going to invest? Each filler plate's like $1.50, right? And we need to probably fill up 10 of those. So for $10, you can save a life. That is a good return on investment. So just something to be mindful of. Also, same place, all the receptacles, all the switches, they all did not have a cover plate. Each cover plate, even for this, what's referred to as a 4-gang box, because there are 4 switches in it. That right there might be a $2 cover. Every other color, anywhere from 50 cents to $1.25. But if you put that cover on, and anybody can put that cover on, that is, less than, for this particular switch, it's less than $2, and it's probably less than 2 minutes of your time. Because if somebody in the dark touches that switch, but they actually touch on the side and they touch one of those metallic things, you're going to get shocked. Hopefully the hand moves away and you don't die, but you're still going to get shocked and it's going to hurt like a son of a gun. So something to be mindful of. All right, in this house, the combustible air was inadequate. So basically what happened is that I believe that, and I don't know this for sure, but I believe that originally the water heater was an electric water heater. And I think it got changed over to a gas water heater. So whenever you have a gas water heater, you need to have air coming in. Now, what I will show you here is that this is referred to as the fire triangle. So you have your fire triangle, you have your heat, oxygen, and fuel. Now, what happens is, in order for there to be a fire, there has to be heat. Okay, that's going to be the igniter sparking. There has to be fuel. That's going to be the natural gas. And there has to be oxygen. So in a room like this, where it's completely shut, completely closed, and there can be no air coming in or out, where's that oxygen going to come from? Because we're already going to have this combustion. Now we need oxygen. It's going to suck that oxygen from somewhere. And it's very, very possible that it might suck the oxygen from the flue. So from the roof, all the way down the flue, and it might suck in that oxygen as combustible air. And if it does that, okay, fine. But then where does the byproduct go? Where is the carbon monoxide, which is a deadly, deadly gas, deadly and odorless gas? And there weren't any carbon monoxide detectors anywhere near this, so there's really no idea if we're safe or not. Now, whenever we do an inspection, we always have a carbon monoxide detector on our person that is actively checking to 1 part per million accuracy of how much carbon monoxide there is in a home. And this home, thankfully, had 0. But if conditions were correct, is it possible that oxygen could come down that flue pipe and all that carbon monoxide gas is going to go into the house? That is referred to as a backdraft. That is very dangerous. Now, whenever I talk about the fire triangle, I also have to talk about the tetrahedron. So basically now, instead of a fire triangle, and I can't do it as easily, but now there's a fire tetrahedron. And so basically this here is a 3D object as opposed to a 2D object. I like to just jokingly call it the fire polygon. But honestly, what this is talking about is a chain reaction. So the chain reaction sometimes starts and doesn't stop. So if we looked at a candle will continue to burn its fuel source until there is no longer a fuel source available, and then the candle will expire. But then there are other things where the chain reaction is not strong enough to continue, and you have to constantly be reapplying, additional input to make it stay lit. And so that might be if you're starting a fire, right? And you apply the heat, but you didn't apply enough heat, and you have to continue because you have wet wood, and the wetness of the wood is stopping that chain reaction. Then that right there is the explanation of the chain reaction. And sometimes that chain reaction can be a chemical chain reaction, which means that if you have, oil-based rags that you've thrown into a container, there can be a chemical reaction that creates that heat, creates everything, and that gives it enough that it can then ignite and you can have a fire. So anyway, just since we're going to talk about the fire triangle, I guess I may as well, for once and only time, talk about the fire tetrahedron and explain to you why that is something that exists. All right, here's something that I just don't understand. Why in the high Rockies, in a high alpine environment, do we have vented crawl spaces? Yes, vented crawl spaces allow us to have lower levels of radon. That's amazing. However, vented crawl spaces venting 9 months of winter into the basement of your house whenever you have inadequate insulation and you have fully exposed water lines means it's a recipe for disaster. If you have an unconditioned crawl space and you're putting in freezing cold exterior air, your pipes are going to freeze. I do not like vents in a high alpine environment. I think getting a radon mitigation system is a much better option. Conditioning a crawl space is a much better option. But at the end of the day, the designer decided that this is the way to do it. And the idea is, okay, if there's any moisture in here, the humidity, it's going to go out to the drier place. Well, the problem is, what if it's more humid outside? Now you've just introduced that humidity into your space. High alpine environment. I would love to hear from a building science expert if they recommend it. But for me, if you're going to have vents into your crawl space and you're going to have exposed plumbing, you really, really, really need to do something to protect that plumbing. Now, if you're taking a shower every 10 minutes, fantastic. But if you are not actively using that water and you only use this house on the weekends, you're going to come back and those pipes are going to be frozen because the water statically sat there and did nothing. So something to be mindful of. All right, this is just me being nitpicky. So you have a round object that has a gap behind it, and the water is going to go down, and then it's going to go back behind your wall, and it's going to cause rot, mold, other things like that. Take caulking and just take it all the way around. Now, you aren't going to do a full circle. You're only going to go around a portion of it, not a full circle. So down to this side, and that's it. The reason we leave the bottom open is that if water does get in there, we want the water to be able to exit somehow. We don't want to trap it back there, but we also don't want to give it, a free pass to go in and behind the wall. So just a little bit of caulking, $1.50 for a little tube. You don't have to have a caulk gun. They have these, small tubes that look like toothpaste tubes, and you can just put that on with your finger, wipe your finger off, or if you have a glove, do that. Or if you have a proper applicator, you can do that. Easy peasy. All right, this one is a trigger for me, all right? We all talk about some of our triggers. This is a trigger, all right? So we have just exhausted all of this radon gas. We've done an amazing job of exhausting all of this radon gas. It is going out of our house, and we're pushing it directly into the soffit vents. And the soffit vents, if you don't know, are the vents that bring air into the attic. And so the attic, there's also, because no house is perfect, well, not some houses are perfect, but most houses have some kind of movement of air between the attic space and the living space. And so we are now introducing highly concentrated levels of radon, which is radioactive gas, into your attic space. What are you doing? Take that pipe up, over, and out and get it away from that window. Get it away from that soffit vent. Just get the radon up, out, and away. There is no reason to reintroduce it into the house. This is probably one of the best examples because you can see the frost buildup of the difference of temperature, and you can see the humidity that is also being brought up out of the ground by this radon mitigation system. And you can see that right there, there's no clearer way to show how much introduction of radon is going directly into those soffit vents. This is a perfect picture to explain that. So anyway, just $20. Just and paint it, make it look nice. You can do those things. Just get the radon out. That's all I have to say about that. All right, water and corrosion. So water heater had some corrosion on it. If it has corrosion, you definitely want to get that fixed. If we have a leak, keep in mind that whenever you're connected to a water supply, that water supply is limitless. It will continue giving you water until forever, meaning it'll continue to flood your house until forever. So you want to make sure that your water heater is definitely not full of corrosion, not full of rust, that all your pipes are good, because if not, you're going to run into an issue, which I think we're going to see a little bit later. All right, this one here. If you have kids, if you know kids, and you also happen to have a garage door, this is your responsibility. Go grab a 2x4, put it underneath the door, and close the garage door. If the garage door does not hit it and then come right back up, then that means you have a problem. This particular door was a custom, super duper heavy wooden door. This door by itself, even with the springs helping to bring it back up, I mean, this door is like a 500-pound door. Now imagine a small child having 500 pounds across their chest. Now, even with these springs here can reduce that weight a little bit, and we might only be talking 100 pounds. Take a 6-year-old, put 100 pounds on their chest, and you know what happens. It is your responsibility as a homeowner to reduce your liability and make sure people are safe, to just make sure things are good. Do you know what the fix to this is? Do you know how serious of an issue this is? This is a red issue. This is a big deal. It's a deal breaker. No. What it is a knob that you twist. You literally just twist this knob. It's inside where you change the light, and it is the tension for bringing the door back down. You just turn it to go lighter, like I don't want as much pressure, and then you put that 2x4 underneath there, and if it hits it and bounces right back up and the door fully retracts back to where it was, then you're golden. You're perfect. And all it took was popping up that cover and giving a little twist, maybe a quarter of a twist. If you can twist a knob a quarter of the way, this is the resolution. And it's so silly because there's so many issues in a house that could potentially kill somebody that honestly take less than 20 seconds worth of effort to make completely safe. So that's my soapbox, getting off of it. I hope that's the only soapbox for today, but we'll see. All right. In this house, there was a radiant zone where I think in that bottom right-hand picture, you can see that like half of the floor is dark blue and purple and the other half is yellow. Now, I cannot tell if that radiant zone was that way per manufacturing, like they decided that whenever they installed it, they don't need to heat this part of the floor because the rest of the house will keep it warm. That could be the case, or it could be that there was a failure and that the zone, a pipe was closed, whatever. It didn't look like a pipe was closed whenever I looked at the system. It looked like everything was open and operating correctly, and it looked like to me, this looks like this was probably the way that it was designed. Is it the best design? No, not necessarily. Is it wrong? No, not necessarily. But it's one of those things that our thermal camera can pick up, and then you can just have an HVAC guy come and take a look at it. You can inquire with the seller if they're the original builder of the house, and they've been there for the entire life. Hey, what's going on here? So next thing, exterior walls. All right, so on these houses, whenever you have two pieces of siding that come together, there's normally a piece of flashing right there on that seam because we don't want rain coming into that seam. We actually want rain to hit and then come down away from everything. And so they put these little spacers in there. And on this house, some of the spacers were missing, and you can see the picture with the green. All of these spacers are there, and then there's a couple that are in the blue circles that aren't there. And so you can just get these spacers for super cheap, just slide them up onto there. If you want to put a little bit of caulking just on the edge, or glue or adhesive, and put that up there, they won't fall out. It'll be perfect. So super easy fix if you are worried about it. If you're not worried about it, don't worry about it. So next thing, stair tread depth needs to be no less than 10 inches. So this was at 9.5. And so what happens here is that what you're stepping on is actually shorter. So whenever you're coming down the stairs, there's the likelihood that your heel could potentially, because you're used to other stairs, not be quite level. Your foot will then, fall a little bit of a plantar flexion. The foot will just go like this, and then you will start to slide on down the stairs. So is there a fix to this? No. I mean, nobody is going to completely demolish that stair set and put it in the correct way. This is just one of those things that just is. And I think even in the last one, we talked about stairs, how sometimes they just are, and there's not much that can be done about it. All right. So in this refrigerator, I think every single door, accessory tray on the door was cracked, broken, or damaged in some way. This is reported upon because it's going to cost you some money and it might take time. And who knows if the manufacturer still has those replacement parts. So just one of those things to be mindful of. All right. So I blurred out the people that installed this. I blurred out their logo because to me, this crawl space was about 5.5, maybe 6 feet deep, and water heaters are heavy. And I think what happened is they're like, okay, Jim, bring it down to me. And then Jim brings it down to him. And the other guy realizes, oh, wow, over top of my head, because you always want to be in your workspace right here. You want to be in your little workspace because this is where I have the most power and the most control. If I have my hands all the way, here, we'll do it. Now I'm off the screen. If I have my hands all the way up here, and I'm going to take a 200-pound water heater, and I'm going to just gently and slowly bring it right down to here. And then I'm just going to gently and slowly bring it right down to, like, you're joking yourself. It's never going to happen. They had not enough guys to do the job that needed done. Hell, maybe there was only one guy that was doing it instead of two, but there really should have been 3, maybe even 4 to get this thing down there safely, or have some type of system pulley or whatever to get it down there the right way. Long story short, it appears as if they dropped it. And not only did they drop it, but instead of getting a brand new one, since they're the ones that damaged it, they just installed it anyway. Nah, it'll buff out, right? So, I don't know. Whenever I see things like this, I would personally contact the person that installed it, and I'd get them to put in a new one. Is anything damaged? There's no way to know. Well, it's not leaking. Yeah, not leaking now, but maybe it's going to leak in a year, because we have damaged that sidewall. We've bent it. Maybe this is now a place for corrosion. Did we dislodge the sacrificial rod that's inside of it? Are we now going to have more rust and other issues like that? The thing is, we don't know the condition of it because it was dropped. It needs to be replaced. That's, long story short, that's what needs to happen. So, and it needs to be replaced by the people that dropped it. Not even necessarily by the homeowner. It needs to be replaced by the people that installed it. It's just silly. All right, so here. I do have another trigger, it turns out. If you want to talk about triggers, here's a trigger. I came back and they specifically stated, we fixed this repair. Repairs were fixed. So I came back, I put my moisture meter in the exact same 2 holes that I had it in before. Boom, still moisture. All right, well, whatever. All right. So then I take my thermal camera and I can see clearly still a dark spot in the wall. It's still evaporating moisture. We call up the plumber. It's an old leak. You mean, whenever you say old, do you mean it has been there for a long period of time, which it has? Or whenever you say old, you mean it's no longer active because it's active? So they say, well, we couldn't find, where the leak was coming from. So you lift up the ceiling tile directly above where that is, and you take a look. And actually, this was the ceiling tile just to the left because of the way the ceiling was. And you take a look, and there is a soaking wet pipe with all sorts of corrosion on it. And you're telling me, as a master plumber, you could not say, there is a leak here. If I lift the ceiling tile, which there were ceiling tiles, if I lift the ceiling tile to expose what's underneath, and I look at the pipe, you're telling me that you could not identify that the wall was saturated, that the pipe was leaking, and that the wall on the exterior or in the bathroom was leaking. That, to me, is a trigger. Whenever I specifically tell somebody this is where it is, and then they specifically state, we fixed it, and then my client pays me more money to go back to verify they did the work. And then the work's not done. And then the contractor says, we couldn't find it. And I poke my head up for 1 second and it's clear as day. That is a trigger. Woo. All right. Hold on. Good morning. All right. All right. The sun is warm. The grass is green. The sun is warm. The grass is green. Moving on from that trigger. Let's go to another one. So this right here, issue repaired. So basically what happened is that there was an issue with the foundation. And because there was an issue with the foundation, this particular house had some repairs done to it. Now, there are things in this house, such as a crack going across the ceiling. There were things in the house, such as doors that wouldn't latch or wouldn't open or close properly, which tells me, yeah, there was definitely some sort of settlement. But then you go into the crawl space, and there have been repairs. And so if you take a look at these repairs right here, it was substantial. And I think what happened was that we had water coming into that crawl space, saturating the soil, and the house was either sinking or the foundation wall was moving. So they put in these large walls to basically stop that movement. So these walls are now holding it back. The walls are also on a little bit more of a footer. So maybe were we sinking and so we've dispersed the weight a little bit more? I don't 100% know. And then they installed sump pumps to basically 2 of them to suck water out of the ground and eject it elsewhere. With all of that being said, I definitely have my concerns because they did not want to disclose the structural engineer's report. They did not want to disclose who did the work. They did not want to disclose any of that kind of stuff. And so to me, that is a red flag because anybody can pour concrete and some people can make it look good. But what I want to know is who gave it the final, blessing? Who said this is great? Because what I would love to have seen is I would love to have seen that foundation wall supported. I would love to have seen, which you would not know, but I would love to have them jack up that side of the house, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 an inch, and then redo that pony wall, basically, we'll just call it, that cripple, that support, whatever you want to call it. And then the doors would open and close properly. Things would do what they're supposed to do. The doors did not open and close properly. And the fact that they didn't want to give us any kind of information about the repair, that's just a red flag. I don't like red flags. Not a big fan. Red, white, and blue, love it. Red flags by themselves, not a fan. So let's talk about this electrical service panel. In here, what happened, which you can see, is that they took a white wire and plugged it in with all the grounds, and they took a grounding wire and plugged it in with all the whites. Now, depending, there's a lot of rules and regulations about when you can bond the neutral and the ground together, which is going to be at the very first service disconnect. But let me just tell you, at this particular house, we had a meter base panel. Then we had an exterior panel. Then we had a garage panel, and we had an inside the house panel. There's basically like 4 disconnect points, and now we're bonding neutrals and grounds. I don't like it at all. Here's why I don't like it. Right now, this is set up to a 40 amp breaker because this is designed for a range. And so anyway, it's set up to a 40 amp breaker, be it what it may. And what you have is that now, because we have crossed the neutral and the ground, 2 things have happened. One is the grounds may no longer be true grounds. They might actually be powered. So whenever you turn off a breaker, there's a possibility that electricity could still be going back to those grounds, and so, or neutrals, or vice versa. And so now that everything's kind of intermingled, I don't really know what's turned off and what's not turned off. So that's step 1. But the real issue, step number 2, is that because that has happened, now electricity, because I have my 120 volt hot legs, those go back as 240 volts. Now what has happened is that in order to complete the circuit, normally it'd be, this one, so a red, a black, and a white, and that goes back, and the ground's just there just in case. Well, now the electricity is halfway going back on the ground and halfway going back on the white. And so let's say that I have 60 amps, an issue has occurred, and now there are 60 amps going back on this wire. Okay. At 40 amps, it's supposed to turn off, but 60 amps is now going through that circuit. Well, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is that because it has been split into 2 directions, that means that what is going back to that neutral bus bar, what that breaker is thinking is that, okay, we have this path and we're really only going to be doing, 30 on this one and 30 on this one. And that's less than 40, so I'm not going to trip the breaker. We don't have a problem. We would have to get all the way to 80 amps in that system before the 40 amp breaker would trip. Now, granted, there are times where this is not true, but in this particular case, it very much looks like that is true. And so with that being said, even if they were allowed to bond the neutrals and the grounds together, for the sake of making things look professional or pretending to be a professional, put the white wires with the white wires, put the unsheathed, unprotected, exposed wires with the grounds. That's the way to make it look good. And then we can worry about a bonding screw later, because if there was a change to the electrical system and we want to take this bonding screw out, then that is our choice. But right here, they've taken our choice away from us and we'd have to rewire that panel. And I honestly think that they cut one of the wires too short and they're like, good enough. And they put it back in. Is it good enough? Yeah, it's good enough. But if there is an electrical issue, you're going to have a real bad time. So talking about electrical things, let's not use extension cords as permanent wiring. So I believe that into this septic system, there's a heater inside the septic system. What's the problem with using an extension cord? Well, one, the extension cord is not rated for continuous use. Two, the extension cord is not rated for continuous exterior use. Three, the wire is completely unprotected, which means that if grandpa goes by with a lawnmower, not only is his lawnmower going to get electrified, but also that wire is now cut, damaged, whatever. It could be unplugged. There's a GFCI breaker on this particular outlet, which means that if the GFCI is tripped, which is safe and good, that there's no way to know that that outlet has been tripped and now your septic system has frozen. Why do we not just have something with an alarm that will audibly and visibly tell us that, hey, the heater is no longer on and operating because the GFCI has tripped? Why do we not have something in conduit going to exactly where it needs to be? Why do we not have a permanent solution? And why do we need a heater inside of there in the first place? Was this not dug below frost line? These are just questions. All I'm doing is I'm just a guy who asks questions. That's all I do, okay? So in here, we have old mold growth. And old mold growth, it did not appear to be active, did not appear to be, whatever. But basically, without disclosing this, there was a leak, and I believe it was a burst pipe. This is on an exterior wall, and whenever I walked into the house, every single cabinet door was open for where the water was. And why would that happen? Well, that would happen because somebody had a bad time, and they decided that what needed to be done was something to basically allow air to get in there to keep those pipes nice and warm. And so the pipe froze and burst, and you can tell because this was a manufactured home, and on this there are valves that you can't really just find at any hardware store. They're kind of specific, but not really. And so somebody put a ball valve on there, and you can see where they spliced out a section where they cut it and then put in a new section and put in a ball valve to replace what had already been previously damaged. And so really, all I'm getting at is that if something happened, just disclose it to the people that are buying the house. Number two, clean up your mold appropriately. Number three, don't try to hide things, I guess, is all I'm saying. If there's a pipe that bursts, just say the pipe burst. If you need to keep doors open because you had a pipe burst in the past, tell people I need to keep doors open. Or work on the issues, vented crawl space, insulation, or a whole bunch of other issues that could be going on. We just want all that stuff kind of fixed, but don't lie to people. That's just rude. That's all that is. All right, so this oven here, the oven of future death, impending doom. So basically it was attached to this cabinet, but the cabinet was not necessarily designed to hold the weight of that oven. And the face of that cabinet is pulling out, and that means that entire oven is going to fall. The entire oven's going to fall. And so there are ways to fix that with just little L brackets. Here's the face, here's the side, put in an L bracket, bolt it, screw it, whatever, we're good to go. So it can be fixed, but you have to remove the entire oven more than likely to get this fixed. And whenever you opened up the doors, the gap just got bigger, and then you close the door, and then you open the door and the gap got bigger, and then you close the door. This will fall out. Without a doubt. It may not be today, it might not be 5 years from now, but this will fall out. And the fact that there's already damage to the cabinet holding it in place, that's going to be bad for somebody on Thanksgiving dinner night. So up here, so this is from a manufactured home, and basically the trusses basically fold in, right? So all of the support for the roof fold in. They drop the one piece of the crane, they drop the other piece of the crane, and then they hoist up the roof, and then they put in these legs that fold out to put it into place. There should have been 3 nails on this one side holding this in place. Nobody put the nails in. No big deal. It's really that's why it's a minor repair needed. Here's what you do. You take a pry bar, you just put it in there, you pull back, and you put in 3 nails. If you do not have a pneumatic nailer that you can get up there, and you don't have a battery operated pneumatic nailer, then what you do is you just take your nail, you get 3 nails started. So that way they're all started almost all the way through the piece of wood where it just takes 1 hit to sink it. Pull back with the pry bar, sink it, sink it, sink it. Once you've synced 3 nails, you're right as rain. It's not a big deal. But if you don't do that, then the roof cannot support the weight of the snow, and then you'll eventually have a structural failure of the roof. 3 nails in this particular location is all that's needed. The other locations, just a little bit of upgrading, updating, because there's probably been heavy snow loads and whatnot, but you really want to be able to just pull that over and then put in more nails, and you're good to go. But basically, Not a big deal, but a big enough deal. So here we go. This is a better picture right here. And so what you're able to see, you can kind of see like 2 nails right down here, but basically, oh, you can see the 3 nails on the left-hand side of the circle. So you see how they put those 3 nails in just like that right there? That's exactly what we want to do on the other side into that vertical piece of wood. Because right now it is just, instead of being on the piece of wood, it's like, not so much. So we just want it to be on that piece of wood so we can distribute loads appropriately. All right, moving on. This sink here is one of those, really inexpensive laundry vanities, for like $100, $125. It comes with the sink, the faucet, whatever, and like a little door. But somebody had either dropped something or put something in, and you can really, really see it whenever I put the flashlight underneath, that we have all these cracks inside the basin of the sink. We just want to get that replaced. Not a big deal. This right here, radon system inadequate. So basically, in order for a radon system to work, and I think this will be a little bit better here. So in order for the radon system to work, we need to seal with plastic. Well, let's start over. We need to dig a trench around the dirt foundation, put in a corrugated pipe, basically, that then goes to another pipe that goes to a fan. We then put plastic down over top of it. We then secure around the edges, make it an airtight seal. So as that fan comes, it just sucks that up, creates an area of low pressure, and says, hey, come on, radon, let's go over here. And we're going to go up this way. And the fan just shoots the radon right out. So that's great. And then, of course, we want the radon, like we said earlier, to go all the way up and away from the house. This radon is right at the base, and it doesn't go all the way up. It's literally right at the base underneath the kitchen window. So we are going to get radon gas. If I open up the kitchen window and I say, oh my gosh, it's a beautiful day, I want to breathe in the fresh air. Well, I'm breathing in tasteless, colorless, radioactive gas coming from my radon system. And that's not good for doing dishes. It's just going to make you have a bad time. So we want for all of the plastic to be properly sealed. We want to make sure there is actually something around the perimeter to create that area of low pressure. We want to make sure there's an exhaust pipe going out, and we want to make sure that exhaust pipe goes all the way up and out and all the way past the roof. So that way we aren't getting radon coming back in. All right, this crawl space, I was only here to do a sewer scope, but whenever I was doing the sewer scope, it's just, how can you not know that the whole ground is saturated and that water is actively like dripping into the crawl space from the foundation wall, which is not ideal. So there's insulation falling, there's mold growing, there's other funguses growing, and there's you can actively see water dripping off the wall coming in. So I was only here to do the sewer scope inspection, which did marginally okay. A lot of clay pipes, and I don't know if I have, hey, there it is. So lots of clay pipes and lots of roots coming in from the clay pipes. And then also some areas where we have a bunch of sludge buildup, and we just want to kind of knock that sludge out, have somebody come out and just rotary clean out those clay pipes, because this house is old, really, really old. So just, a few things to think about. This house here, if you can put the word structure and do it myself together, you're doing something wrong. You shouldn't do it, 100%. So crawl space, structure inadequate. So let me show you a couple of these photos here. So first off, the strength of a 4x4 is reduced to a 1x4 when you cut out 3 inches. It's just that simple. Whenever you use screws are very likely to shear. If a screw shears, then the whole thing comes down. That's why you're supposed to use nails, because nails will bend and bend and bend and bend. And then before they break, they have bent so much that you're like, oh my gosh, look at this thing that's failing. Whereas everything can look perfect, 100% perfect, and then it just shears with a screw. And so don't use drywall screws for structural purposes. Just an idea, just throwing it out. I'm just a guy who reports things. The next thing is, not only do we need to be properly anchored to the support post above, but we need to be anchored to the ground. This ground, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, is sloped. And then they put down like a piece of 2x12. And then they put this piece of wood in, and I think they just hammered on it till it fit. There needs to be a concrete footing. The depth of the concrete footing, the size of the concrete footing, all needs to be determined by a structural engineer. You then, based off of their recommendation, need to put a 4x4? Probably not. Realistically, a 6x6 or an 8x8 to be able to support that weight. And then how did you jack up the floor already to be able to put that in to then have it rest at the right height? Who did the measurements to make sure the floor is the way that it's supposed to be? There's just a lot of things that are wrong here. If I were to bump into this, the whole base of it could just slide right out. And if it slides right out, then Will the structure collapse? I don't know. Will the structure sag? Yes. And so it's just one of those things that if you can put the words, I'm going to do a structural improvement to my house and I'm going to do it myself. If you can say that sentence, just stop right there. Just stop. Whatever the issue is, I guarantee you that there's more than just one solution. Whenever you think about things, they are in tension and they are in compression. And if you were to take a look, perfect, I have my marker. Let's do this real quick. If I have my marker right here and I am putting a pressure on it and I'm trying to bend this marker, if I am trying to bend this marker this way, you can see it with my hands. And what you're seeing is that when my hands do this, and I'm looking at my screen over here just to make sure you can see it. When I do this, you can see that this is expanding and this is contracting. So as I do this, this is going to be under compression and this here is going to be under tension. Whenever I place a piece of wood as a structural member, I have just changed the dynamics of the way that the house was designed for what should be under compression and what should be under tension. And without going through and seeing where all the joints for all of the beams, the girders, and how those overlap and how those have been mated. And maybe if we have floor joists that have been sistered in a certain way, whenever I do this, I take away all of the intended tension and compression that was inherent to the design of this house. I just don't like it. And that's why it's red. So next thing, window egress inadequate. So this particular window, I'm a skinnier guy. I can't fit through these windows and escape this bedroom. Not only that, they are way too high off of the ground. If I had a small trampoline, you know, like one of those like jazzercise trampolines, if I had one of those and a running head start, and I've been practicing my parkour, like I watched Cirque du Soleil, you know, whatever, and I had that window all the way open, and I could get myself a running head start and kind of, you know, jump through it, maybe I could get into and then out of that window. But the reality is that you just can't. And so with this being a bedroom, you really need to have a way to get out. And right now they don't have that. So again, that's why that's red, because it could definitely hurt somebody. All right, electrical wiring. This one is fun. So the best thing that I could find was basically a 1912 is about maybe whenever that light switch was invented. So 1912, that's pretty old. And so let's just say 1920s, but everything is knob and tube. You don't really want a house with knob and tube. You want to make sure that our wires are not cloth coated. We want a different kind of coating. But here is a picture of that light switch. Now, the interesting thing is you can't quite see it because it's a little bit, you know, not perfect, believe it or not, after 100 years of use. The light switch still operates, and that white section normally says on, and then the black section is black with white text, and it says off. It does work, it just doesn't always fall into the proper, you know, position so you can actually read it. But man, that was an advancement to see something be able to tell you on or off so you know if the circuit is connected or disconnected. But the issues that we have with this, so here's an example of knob and tube. So here's knob and tube. So these are tubes right here. They're just ceramic tubes that the wire goes through. And each one of these wires, one is hot, one is not. I think the one on the left is the hot, and then the one that is not is on the right. They are cloth sheathed, and so that can be broken down. Rodents can eat it, you know, a million different things. Here are a few of the issues. Also in the crawl space, here we go, knob and tube, getting over to a light bulb. And the breaker, so old. After 40 years, you need to replace your breaker anyway. I don't know how old this breaker is. I did not take it off. It's made by General Electric. General Electric has done a good job. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue. But here's where the real issue is. There are splices that are not to standards that are modern, which can create arcing where electricity jumps from one connector to the next. If there's arcing, then there's heat. If there's heat, then there's fire. We saw that triangle. Don't even get me started with a tetrahedron, but we saw that triangle. And so with that being said, this is just a fire risk waiting to happen. In addition to that, every single outlet, and I don't know if I have a picture, I do not, but every single outlet is just a two-prong. So we have a hot and a neutral. So then I don't have a ground. So there's no hot, neutral, and ground. And what that means is that I cannot properly protect metal appliances and other things like that. So I would need to run a ground. If I run the ground, then that means that the metal, let's say like a washing machine. So a washing machine will use a standard 120 plug. And that ground is going to be connected directly to the chassis. And so now the chassis, if something were to happen from moving parts or whatever, if an electrical wire were to touch the metal frame of that washing machine, then that electricity is going to go through that metal frame and then right out that grounding wire. And whenever it goes out that grounding wire, then we're safe. If we don't have that grounding wire and you touch that washing machine, lights out, you're done. So we really want to update things. Now, what you can do is you can put a Gfci on there, and the Gfci will have 3 prongs. Now, I won't be able to test the Gfci because in order to test the Gfci, I need to be able to ground it so I can take the electricity, and instead of allowing it to do a circle between the hot and neutral, what happens is I create a circle or a path between the hot and ground, and then the neutral's like, hey, you left me out. And then that turns off the Gfci, which is a ground fault circuit interrupter. And so basically, you can put a Gfci onto these outlets to update them and make them safer. The reality, though, is that you do not have a ground. So for certain appliances that require there to be a ground to protect the metal chassis, such as a washing machine, you're not going to be in the best of positions. But for like charging your laptop, your iPhones, plugging in a TV, all of that can be Gfci protected to make sure that if you do get shocked, that it happens for less than 200 milliseconds, and that it is basically less than the 0.7 amps or whatever that we talked about. And so that's really what we want to talk about, is just updating this electricity to be the modern era. This house is from the 18 something or another's, late 1800s. So I totally get it, but still we can be safer than that. This one here, the drain would not drain. There was no air admittance valve. So same thing, if you have a cup and you put your finger on the straw, you can lift that water, you can take it with you everywhere. And until you let air to go into the system, it's just going to stay there. And that's exactly what this did until it started gurgling. And then once it was gurgling, then the water on every gurgle could go down, and then it stopped. And then there'd be a gurgle, and then it could go down and it would stop. And then there'd be a gurgle, and then it would go down and stop. And so this right here, we just need to install an air admittance valve. That's if we don't have any kind of clogs inside the drain, but air admittance valve is what we want to add to this one. All right, this is a little unconventional. Normally what you would do is, you see how right here we have a Y coming in to this, and I labeled that as green. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. It's super old, but I mean, it's good enough. It's better than what was done down here. Down here, they actually bored a hole into the cast iron and then came in that way. Now, if I bore a hole and my pipe comes in, how deep does my pipe come in? And as stuff comes down, is it hitting the top of that pipe? So if this is a cross section right here, and I put that pipe in, is it this far and I'm only getting a little bit of junk? Is it this far and I'm getting a whole bunch of junk? Or is it almost the entire way and I'm creating my very own blockage in here? In addition, it's just is not ideal, and there was no reason that the plumbing had to go down this far. It could have been connected into the Y above, but they decided to do it this way, or at least it looked like it could have been. So just things to be mindful of. Is it working? Yeah, it's working, but it could have been done better. Here's another interesting thing. So you really need to make sure that you have ventilation inside of your shower, bathroom, whatever area, anytime there's hot, humid air. So what happened is they have this section cut out, and they have that air coming in. Exiting. So they have that hot, humid air exiting the bathroom, and then it is touching the cold ceiling, because the cold ceiling is not as warm as inside the bathroom. It touches the cold ceiling, then you get mold, mildew, any other kind of microbial growth, fungal growth, whatever it may be. So just put a fan in. And if you put a fan in, then you're taken care of. But in this particular case, the bathroom is warmer than the hallway. And as soon as that hot, humid air touches that cold ceiling, it condensates. And the mold says, oh my gosh, thank you for that wonderful lunch. And then they start growing and reproducing and releasing spores. And that's whenever you have allergies to mold and other things like that. So put a layer of kills on this, which basically just stops that microbial growth, and get yourself a ceiling fan, and you're good to go. All right, right here, you want to make sure all your pipes are supported. All of these pipes, the support failed. We want to put in support that can actually handle the heat, because these supports are used for heating the house. And so these pipes are getting really, really hot. And I think that is degrading the ability for this particular polymer, this plastic, to stay strong. And so we want to just get that replaced if at all possible. All right, this is the largest dust bunny I have ever seen in my entire life. The largest dust bunny ever. So long story short, this is some kind of mutant variant, something. Get a vacuum cleaner, get it gone. You don't need to have dust. Dust mites can live in something this large, and definitely allergies for children. Go through whenever you get a house, find all the nooks and crannies, get a vacuum cleaner, suck it all up. There's no reason to have this much dust this close to a bedroom. So next one, whenever there's trash at a at a home inspection, we always put in that there's a bunch of trash on the exterior. The reason why is because it doesn't come cheap or for free to fill up a trailer and take it over to the landfill and dump it off. That costs money, that takes time, that takes effort. Who knows if there's any biological hazards that are in there? Who knows if there's a raccoon with babies that's going to be really, really upset with you for taking away their home? We want this trash gone. We want it to be a part of your negotiation phase whenever you say, hey, you will get all of this trash off of the property, or you will pay for somebody to get all this trash off of the property, but the trash needs to be gone. Talk to your realtor. You do not want to have somebody else's trash. Even me, I had no clue that there was all this trash in my crawl space after my home inspection, whenever this was, 6 years ago before I started the business. And I was very upset to find out that it took a massive dump trailer, took 3 loads to the landfill, costing hundreds of dollars to get rid of all of this junk that was in this crawl space whenever I bought this house. Because you walk through the house as a home buyer, who is like, I am paying to have an inspection done. And then you go into the crawl space and you see that it is the whole length of the house just filled with trash. And it takes you almost a week just to get all the stuff out. And there's just, So for me, I've made sure that all of my home inspectors don't allow this to happen to their customers. If there is an excessive amount of trash or personal items, we say, get it gone. We put it in here. We let people know because not knowing really hurts whenever you find out. And then you have a whole project ahead of you to get things done. So next thing, crawl space, freezing pipes. If you're putting heaters in your crawl space, A, that's super inefficient, but B, that tells me that you've had freezing pipe issues before, and you better have disclosed that we've had frozen pipes before. Because if we see a union that was put together where clearly that was, where a pipe broke, or we see, water damage or other things like that, we're going to call it out for sure. Poor Shay. This is one from Shay. He almost put his hand in a dead mouse. Enough with the dead pictures. But Shay almost put his hand on this dead mouse as he was doing the crawl space thing. Just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like it. Not one bit. All right. So if your septic system is cracked because it was hit by a snowplow, you can pretty much guess that it's going to need replaced. I mean, if just the top is cracked, how deep did that crack go? Are we seeping sewage? Somebody needs to take a look at this. We do not do septic. That is not our thing, but a septic inspector needs to come out and they need to verify if that is good to go. This house was a gorgeous multi-million-dollar house. But up in the raft, like up in the vaulted ceiling, they had a main beam, and that beam comes in at 20% moisture, shrinks down to 4% moisture, and now we have gaps on either side of that beam. And we just want to, some kind of sealant, caulking, whatever it may be, to make sure that we aren't getting any kind of like hornets, wasps, or other, insects coming into the house. And also just from like a heating standpoint to make sure we aren't losing any kind of air. Now this AV wiring cables. So basically with these cables, there are a lot of cables that we, make sure are not energized, but we don't test electronics. It's just too complex. This home actually had a Crestone product, which you pay a lot of money to have somebody get an iPad, put on your family's pictures, this, that, the other, have all this automation that if you press buttons, the blinds come down, the TV turns on, this happens, the fireplace lights, like all this automation. We don't test that. That's not for us to do. But whenever we have cables that have been cut or this or that, basically, you need somebody to be able to trace those wires back and say, okay, this Ethernet cable is plugged into the switch. It's port, blah, blah, blah. This coax cable is connected, not connected. We have speaker cables that actually go to this room or that room. We need to set up these zones in this particular way. There's a lot of work to be done with that. And basically what I'd say is that just because you have a multi-million-dollar house does not mean that you're exempt from issues. There are so many issues in multi-million-dollar houses to just be aware of. Do I think somebody is watching this is buying a multi-million-dollar house? No, not at all. But I'm just going to put it out there because, again, this is used for my inspectors to go back and review things. And if you, as somebody on YouTube, enjoys watching this, more power to you. I love it. But multi-million-dollar houses, you're not safe. There's always going to be some sort of issue. Like, let's take the $16,000 range, for instance. This range is a $16,000 range. And because it was not well cared for, this is what the flames look like. Huge, just shooting out on either end and nothing around the sides. Basically, you have to take a pin and you have to break off all the carbon deposits in every single one of probably the 80 holes that's on just that one burner. And you have, I think that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 plus the griddle. So that's a lot of work just to get it back up and running to the way that it was supposed to be. All right. Sometimes there are hornet's nests. This one is inactive and gone. It can still damage siding, still damage rocks, still damage a whole bunch of things. In here, this goes back to that 20% moisture down to 5% moisture. If you are a drywaller and you are watching this, please do me a favor. Take your drywall And I know you can perfect cuts every time. You can get right up onto that beam. But what's going to happen is the beam is going to shrink. So you're like, okay, the beam shrinks and now we have a gap. However, the main support for that beam is also going to shrink. And so what's going to happen is that beam is going to push down on that drywall. That drywall is non-compliant and we're going to get a crack. And then the homeowner is going to say, there's a diagonal crack. This is terrifying. And yeah, we just I know you can drywall so perfectly to have zero gap, but please put in gap, fill it in with paintable caulking, because that caulking will expand and contract, and that's going to be so much better. Because whenever you have those two different materials, you're just going to run into an issue, and it's going to look ugly. And I know that you can do a good job if you're a drywaller, and you don't have to be right up against it. Do the drywall, fill with caulk. Know that it's two different materials that expand and contract at two different rates whenever it comes to temperature, humidity, and a range of other variables. Just take the extra time to give yourself a little bit more space. It's easier on you as well. All right, carpet needs to be restretched. That's an easy one. Have a carpet guy come out, stretch it, cut it, make it work, make it look beautiful. The carpet does not need to be replaced, but stretching carpet sometimes can be cumbersome. So we highly recommend you guys having somebody professionally do that. All right, this one here, wall repair. So again, difference of materials, things settling, things cracking. It's just, I think that it's bad drywalling in general. But it could be something more, but in general terms, I think that's just bad drywall. The door, so this door did not fit. You kind of had to like pull it and then push it over. Just bad install. It happens. Sometimes with less expensive doors, they kind of flex as you're installing it. And so you don't always get like the most perfect close, or they flex over time. Now this one here, again, bad drywalling, and we're just going to move from this crack then to this right here. This is also bad drywalling. So whenever you have bad drywalling, drywallers will basically put a little bit of mud, put some tape, put a little bit of mud, and then they'll be like, oh, that's good enough. This should be a multi-day process where you let the mud dry to a certain amount, and then you put on a thicker amount of mud. Whenever you see the tape like this and you see the cracking on that seam where that tape is, that's because they did not put a thick enough amount of mud onto there. And a lot of times you want to put that nice thick amount of mud on there, and then you want to come back and you want to put on another thicker layer of mud. And you kind of, I guess if this is your tape right here on top of my laptop, so if this is your tape here, you taper on the first one, you let it dry, and then you taper longer on the second, and then that way it looks better and the tape is secure, everything is good, it'll reduce cracking, just one of those things. So this right here, the balusters, these balusters are about 8 inches on center. They need to be about 4 inches on center. And the reason that is that we don't want to have a baby, an infant, or anybody crawling or starting to walk and then fall off of that balcony. That is deadly. And so modern standards say 4 inches. And this is really easy because you basically have the balcony right here. You're standing up here. There's the ground, down here. So standing here, ground down here. And the beams are actually just attached to the exterior of that. Very, very simple to do that upgrade. Taking no time at all. But again, red item because it can hurt somebody. Same thing here. You open ground in a kitchen? What? No, we don't want to have an open ground in the kitchen. We want to be GFCI protected and we want to have a ground. This one right here, this is what we're going to end on, is that if you want to put your hook for your towel, don't put it somewhere where your glass door can smack into it. If that glass door smacks into it, you're out of luck. That glass door is going to shatter and you're barefoot. It's just not a good thing to have happen. I guess if the glass door shatters, you could probably then just grab your towel because it's hidden behind the door anyway, which is so uncomfortable. I don't understand. You open up the door, you can't get to your towel. You have to walk out and close the door. Now you're cold and dripping wet, and now you can grab your towel? Come on, we can do better than that. So anyway, that's just one of those things where we don't want to have a glass door accidentally bumping up against anything else. So in general terms, that pretty much wraps it up. I just want to say thank you for watching the February 2021 in-service training. I think, this is a good resource for our inspectors, but if you geek out on this stuff like I do, sometimes it's just fun to see some of the mistakes that are made in different houses and how you can come about to avoid such things. I'm very, very excited that in March, we're going to be using the new template. We're going to be using those new iPads to be doing all of the inspection items in the home and basically have a report that's 90% done, ready for you to view the moment that we leave the home inspection. I think that is going to be an absolute game changer, and we are so excited about being able to offer that to you guys. In addition to that, with Shay and Jeremy and myself, we are already pretty well booked, and we aren't even in the busiest part of the season. So we're very, very excited for the opportunity to be able to do more home inspections and bring on more inspectors and get more stuff done, because I really want to make sure that we are doing the best inspections that we possibly can. And I have faith in my inspectors, our training, our in-service training, our continuing education through InterNACHI, and then also our training that we do here with us. It's just, I really think that we are on the upper level of education and training, and that is very, very important to me as a business owner. So again, thank you so much for watching this in-service training video. And if you have any questions, or if you'd like to schedule a home inspection, please visit 2moosehomeinspections.com. Have a wonderful day.